Captain Sarah Chun crushed her face against the cold metal of the observation deck window. The stars looked different now. They had always been bright and welcoming before, like tiny lights calling humanity to explore and discover. Now they seemed cold and distant, blocked by something she could not see but knew was there. The Zilani blockade. Sarah had been fighting in space for 12 years. She had seen alien ships before. She had even fought some of them. But she had never seen anything like what happened 3 days ago when the Zilani hegemony announced their decision to trap humanity inside their own solar system. The announcement came on all frequencies at once. 12 different alien species speaking as one voice. They called themselves the Zilani hegemony, and they had decided that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to spread across the galaxy. Attention, species designation human, the message had said in perfect English. Your kind has been classified as Class 7 aggressive. You will remain within your birth system. Any attempt to leave will result in immediate destruction. This is not negotiable. Sarah remembered laughing when she first heard it. 12 alien species working together to keep humans locked up? It sounded like something from a bad movie. Then the reports started coming in. Massive ships had appeared at the edge of the solar system. Not just a few ships, but hundreds of them. Each one was bigger than anything humans had ever built. They formed a perfect ring around the entire solar system, so far out that it took light hours to reach them from Earth. But the ships were not the worst part. The worst part was what they were doing. The aliens had brought something called gravity well generators. Sarah did not understand the science behind them, but she understood what they did. They created invisible walls in space that nothing could pass through. The walls were made of twisted gravity that would crush any ship that tried to cross them. Last human trade convoy found that out the hard way. Sarah closed her eyes and tried not to think about the Conway expedition. 47 ships carrying food, medicine, and people to the outer colonies. Families, children, scientists and engineers who were building new homes on distant worlds. They had tried to run the blockade 2 days ago. Sarah had watched the whole thing through her ship's long-range sensors. The convoy had approached the gravity wall at full speed, hoping to punch through before the aliens could react. The lead ship, the merchant vessel Prosperity, had hit the wall first. The ship had not exploded. That would have been too quick. Instead, it had been stretched like rubber, pulled longer and longer until it snapped apart. The pieces had been pulled into the gravity wall and crushed into nothing. 46 other ships had followed it, one by one, in a line of destruction that lasted for 3 horrible minutes. 2,000 people gone. Just like that. The aliens had not even bothered to fire their weapons. They had just watched as humanity killed itself trying to break free. Now Sarah stood on her ship, the UES Defiance, and wondered what they were going to do. Earth had colonies scattered across dozens of star systems. Millions of humans lived on worlds like Proxima Colony, New Terra, and the mining stations in the Centauri belt. All of them were now cut off from Earth, trapped on their own worlds, with no way to get supplies or help. And Earth itself was trapped too. No trade ships coming in, no rare metals from the asteroid belts, no food from the agricultural worlds. Everything that kept human civilization running was now stuck on one side of an invisible wall or the other. Captain, a voice said behind her. Sarah turned to see Lieutenant Rodriguez, her communications officer. The young man looked pale and tired. Nobody had slept much since the blockade began. What is it, Rodriguez? Sarah asked. Message from Earth Command, ma'am. Admiral Hayes wants to see all ship captains for an emergency meeting. Video conference in 1 hour. Sarah nodded. She had been expecting this. The human military was small compared to what was out there in the galaxy, but they had to do something. They could not just sit here and wait to die. "Tell the Admiral I'll be there," she said. "And Rodriguez? Any word from the outer colonies?" The lieutenant shook his head. "Nothing, ma'am. The aliens are jamming all long-range communications. We can't reach anyone outside the system." Sarah felt her stomach twist. Her sister lived on Proxima Colony with her 2 young children. Sarah had no way to know if they were safe, if they had enough food, if they were even still alive. The uncertainty was almost worse than knowing they were dead. She walked back to her quarters and sat down at her desk. The room was small and cramped, like everything on a military ship, but it was home. Pictures of her family covered one wall. Her parents back on Earth, her sister and the kids on Proxima, her brother who had died fighting pirates in the Outer Rim 5 years ago. Got all of them trapped now. All of them depending on people like Sarah to find a way out of this mess. She pulled up the files on the Cylani hegemony that Earth Command had managed to gather. It was not much. 12 species working together, which was almost unheard of in galactic politics. Most alien races could barely get along with themselves, let alone form alliances with others. But somehow the Zalani had done it. They had convinced 12 different species that humanity was dangerous enough to lock away forever. Sarah read through the list of species. The Vek, who looked like giant spiders and were supposed to be master engineers. The Vorthok, a warrior race that had conquered 6 worlds. The Silari, who were so smart they could predict the future with mathematics. And 9 others, all working together to keep humanity trapped like animals in a cage. The worst part was that Sarah could understand why they were afraid. Humans had spread across 50 star systems in just 200 years. They had fought wars, built colonies, and explored places that other species said were impossible to reach. Maybe the aliens had good reason to be scared, but understanding. Their fear did not make Sarah any less angry. The communication system chimed, and Admiral Hayes appeared on her screen. The old man looked like he had aged 10 years in the past 3 days. His gray hair was messy, and his eyes were red from lack of sleep. "Captain Shun," he said, "thank you for joining us. I'll keep this brief. We've lost contact with all outer colonies. Our supply lines are cut, and according to our scientists, those gravity walls are impossible to break with any weapon we have." Sarah felt her heart sink. "So what are our options, sir?" The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "Right now, we have 2 choices. We can surrender and hope the aliens let us live as prisoners in our own system, or we can fight and probably die trying." Sarah thought about her sister and her children, trapped on a distant world with no way home. She thought about the 2,000 people who had died trying to break through the blockade. She thought about all the humans scattered across the galaxy who were now alone and afraid. "With respect, sir," she said, "I think there might be a 3rd option." "And what's that, Captain?" Sarah looked out her window at the stars again. They still looked cold and distant, but now she saw something else in them. She saw challenge. She saw a puzzle that needed solving. She saw the same thing that had driven humanity to leave Earth in the first place. "We find a way to make the impossible possible," she said. "It's what humans do best." The Admiral almost smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that, Captain, because I have a job for you." 18 months had passed since the aliens locked humanity inside their own solar system. Earth had changed in ways that nobody could have imagined. Cities that once sparkled with lights from alien trade goods now looked dim and gray. Food was rationed. Medicine was running low. And everywhere people looked up at the sky and wondered if help would ever come. But in a secret laboratory buried 3 miles under the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Marcus Webb was doing something that the aliens probably thought was impossible. He was building a ship that could walk through walls. Marcus had not slept in 36 hours. His eyes were red and his hands shook from too much coffee, but he could not stop working. Not when he was so close to solving the puzzle that had kept him awake for over a year. The problem was simple to understand, but almost impossible to solve. The alien gravity walls were like invisible barriers made of twisted space. Nothing could pass through them because they crushed anything that tried. But Marcus had been studying pieces of wrecked alien ships that had been floating in space for decades, and he had found something interesting. The aliens used something called phase technology. They could make their ships become ghostly, able to pass through solid matter for short periods of time. It was how they moved through asteroid fields without getting hit. It was how they avoided human missiles during the few battles that had happened before the blockade. Marcus had spent 18 months figuring out how the technology worked. It was not magic, even though it seemed like it. It was physics, just physics that humans had never discovered before. The aliens could change the way their ships interacted with normal space, making them exist in a slightly different reality where solid things could not touch them. And if it worked on solid matter, Marcus thought it might work on gravity walls too. "Dr. Webb," a voice called from across the laboratory. Marcus looked up to see Colonel Parks, the military officer who was in charge of the secret project. The colonel was a short, tough woman who had fought in 3 different wars before the aliens arrived. She was one of the few people who understood how important Marcus's work was. "Any progress, Doctor?" she asked. Marcus wiped his eyes and pointed at the strange device on his workbench. It looked like a metal cube covered in cables and blinking lights. Alien symbols were carved into its surface, symbols that had taken the human translation teams months to figure out. "I think I've got it," Marcus said. "The phase generator is working in simulations. We can make small objects become ghostly for about 3 minutes at a time." Colonel Parks raised an eyebrow. 3 minutes? That's not very long. "It's long enough," Marcus said. Gravity walls are only about 50,000 miles thick. A fast ship could cross that distance in 2 minutes if it doesn't have to worry about being crushed. A colonel looked at the device with new interest. "You're saying we can build ships that can pass through the blockade?" "Ghost ships," Marcus said. "That's what I'm calling them. Ships that can become ghostly long enough to slip through the walls and back into normal space on the other side." It was a crazy idea. It was dangerous and untested and probably impossible. But it was also the first real hope that humanity had found since the blockade began. Colonel Parks picked up a phone and made a call. Within an hour, Admiral Hayes arrived at the laboratory along with a team of engineers and test pilots. They all crowded around Marcus's workbench, staring at the alien device like it was made of gold. "How big can you make this thing?" Admiral Hayes asked. "Big enough for a small ship," Marcus said. "Maybe something the size of a medical transport. The bigger the ship, the more power it needs, and we're already pushing the limits of what human reactors can produce." "And you're sure it will work?" Marcus hesitated. He was a scientist, and scientists were supposed to be honest about uncertainty. But these people needed hope more than they needed perfect honesty. "I'm as sure as I can be without testing it," he said. 3 weeks later, they had their first ghost ship. The UES Whisper was a modified medical transport, barely big enough for 2 people and a small cargo hold. Marcus had installed his phase generator in the ship's engine room, along with enough power systems to run it for exactly 3 minutes and 30 seconds. That gave them a safety margin of 30 seconds, which was not much when dealing with alien technology that could kill them if it failed. Captain Sarah Chun had volunteered to be the test pilot. She was one of the best ship handlers in the human fleet, and more importantly, she was willing to risk her life for a chance to break through the blockade. Her co-pilot was Lieutenant Torres, a young engineer who understood the phase technology almost as well as Marcus himself. They launched the Whisper. at 0400 hours on a Tuesday morning. The plan was simple. Fly toward the blockade at maximum speed. Activate the phase generator when they reached the gravity wall, and hope they came out the other side in one piece. Sarah had been in dangerous situations before, but this was different. She was not just risking her own life. She was risking the only hope humanity had of reconnecting with their lost colonies. The flight to the blockade took 6 hours. Sarah spent most of that time checking and rechecking the ship's systems. The phase generator hummed quietly in the engine room, a sound that reminded her of a cat purring. It was strange to think that something so small and peaceful sounding might be the key to humanity's survival. Approaching the gravity wall, Lieutenant Torres announced. Distance, 50,000 miles and closing. Sarah could not see the wall, of course. It was invisible to human eyes. But her instruments showed the twisted space ahead of them, a barrier. That had already killed thousands of people who had tried to cross it. Phase generator is ready, Torres said. All systems show green. Sarah took a deep breath. This is Captain Shun to Earth Control. We are beginning our attempt to cross the blockade. If this works, we'll contact you from the other side. If it doesn't work. She did not finish the sentence. Everyone knew what would happen if it did not work. Activating phase generator in 3.2. Now, the universe changed. Sarah felt like she was falling and floating at the same time. The walls of her ship became see-through, like they were made of colored glass. She could see stars through the floor of her cabin. Her own hands looked ghostly and strange, and ahead of them, the gravity wall was still there. But now it looked different. Instead of an invisible barrier, it looked like a wall of silver mist that they could fly right through. It's working, Torres whispered. We're passing through the wall. Sarah watched her instruments as they crossed the boundary between the trapped solar system and the free galaxy beyond. For the first time in 18 months, a human ship was outside the prison that the aliens had built for them, but they were not safe yet. The phase generator could only run for 3 minutes, and they had already used 2 of them crossing the wall. They needed to get far enough away from the blockade that the aliens would not spot them when they became solid again. 30 seconds until phase shut down. Torres announced. Sarah pushed the ship's engines to maximum power. They flew away from the blockade as fast as they could, racing against time and technology that they barely understood. 10 seconds, Torres said. Sarah held her breath. 5.4.2. The ship became solid again, with a soft thump that Sarah felt in her bones. She looked at her instruments and saw that they were now 50,000 miles beyond the blockade, flying free in open space. They had done it. They had broken through the aliens' perfect prison. Earth Control, this is Captain Shun, she said. Into her radio. The ghost ship test was successful. Repeat, we have successfully crossed the blockade. The response from Earth was immediate and loud. Cheering voices filled the radio, so many people trying to talk at once that Sarah could not understand what they were saying. But she could hear the joy and hope in their voices, and that was enough. Now came the real test. Sarah turned her ship toward the Proxima system, where her sister and thousands of other humans had been trapped and alone for 18 months. It was time to find out if anyone was still alive out there, and it was time to start building the underground railroad that would smuggle hope back to humanity's scattered children among the stars. Captain Jack Morrison did not look like a hero. He was a big man with a gray beard and scars on his hands from years of fixing broken ships. Most people called him Iron Jack because he could make any piece of junk fly if he put his mind to it. Before the blockade, he had been a simple cargo hauler, moving goods between the outer colonies and making just enough money to keep his ship running. Now he was one of the most wanted men in the galaxy. Jack in the pilot's seat of his ship, the Rusty Angel, and watched the Zelani patrol ships through his telescope. 6 alien vessels were searching the Kepler asteroid belt, looking for human smugglers like him. They had been hunting him for 3 months now, ever since he started running people and supplies through their blockade. The Rusty Angel was not much to look at. Jack had built her from spare parts and salvaged metal, welding together pieces from a dozen different ships until he had something that could fly. She was ugly and loud and smelled like engine oil, but she had one thing that the fancy military ships did not have. She was invisible to alien sensors. Jack had figured out how to coat his ship with a special paint made from asteroid dust and human chemical compounds. The aliens' computers could not tell the difference between his ship and a floating rock. As long as he stayed still and quiet, he could hide right under their noses. But staying still was not going to help the people who needed him. "Captain," a voice whispered from behind him. Jack turned to see Maria Santos, a young woman from the Proxima colony who had volunteered to help with rescue missions. She was one of 50 people crammed into his cargo hold, all of them refugees from colonies that were running out of food and medicine. "What is it, Maria?" Jack asked quietly. "The children are getting scared. They can hear the alien ships flying overhead." Jack nodded. He had been smuggling people for 6 months now, and he had learned that children were always the hardest part. They did not understand why they had to be quiet. They did not understand why they could not go home. All they knew was that they were hungry and afraid and wanted their parents to make everything better. "Tell them we're playing a game," Jack said. "Tell them we're hiding from space pirates, and if they stay very quiet, we'll win the game, and everyone gets ice cream when we reach Earth." Maria smiled. It was not much of a lie. The Zelani were pirates, in Jack's opinion. They had stolen humanity's freedom and trapped millions of people on distant worlds. And if he could get these refugees to Earth safely, he would definitely buy them all the ice cream they could eat. The alien patrol ships moved away slowly, searching another part of the asteroid belt. Jack waited until they were completely out of sight before starting his engines. The Rusty Angel came to life with a gentle rumble that he could feel in his bones. "This is Iron Jack to Underground Railroad Control," he said into his radio, using the code name that the human resistance had given to their smuggling network. "Package delivery is go. Estimated arrival in 12 hours. "Copy that, Iron Jack," came the reply from Admiral Reyes, who was coordinating the resistance from a hidden base in the Jupiter system. "Be advised, Zelani activity has increased in Sector 7. Recommend taking the long way home." Jack smiled. The long way home meant flying through the Horsehead Nebula, a dangerous cloud of gas and dust that could hide a fleet of ships, but also had radiation that could kill you if you stayed too long. It would add 6 hours to the trip, but it was safer than trying to fight 6 alien warships with a cargo hauler full of refugees. "Copy that, Control. Iron Jack out." The flight through the nebula was always nerve-wracking. Jack had to navigate by instruments alone because the thick gas clouds blocked all outside vision. Radiation alarms beeped constantly, reminding him that they were flying through space that was slowly poisoning them. But the nebula was beautiful in its own deadly way, with swirling colors that looked like paintings made of light. "Captain," Maria said, joining him in the cockpit, "the people want to know if you've heard anything about the other colonies." "News from home," Jack sighed. This was always the hardest question to answer. The truth was that some of the human colonies were doing well, building their own ships and fighting back against the aliens. But others were struggling to survive, running out of food and fuel with no way to get help. "New Terra is holding strong," he said. "They've got good farms and smart people. The mining stations at Cygnus are doing okay too, trading with some." of the neutral alien species for supplies. And Proxima? Maria asked. Her whole family was still there, trapped on a world that was supposed to be humanity's first real colony outside the solar system. Jack hesitated. He had just come from Proxima Colony, and the news was not good. The hydroponics farms were failing. The fusion reactor that powered the colony was breaking down, and the Zilani had started sending ships to patrol the system, making it almost impossible for smugglers to get through. But he could not tell Maria that. Not when she was already scared and desperate. Proxima is tough, he said. Your people, there are fighters. They'll make it through this. It was not exactly a lie. The people on Proxima were fighters. But fighting spirit could not fix broken machines or grow food in poisoned soil. The radio crackled to life with a new message. Iron Jack, this is Moondog Actual. We have a problem. Jack recognized the voice of Commander Sarah Chun, who had become the leader of the Ghost Ship program. Her call sign was Moondog, and she was somewhere in the outer system, running supplies to the resistance bases. Go ahead, Moondog, Jack replied. Zilani Hunter-Killer Squadron has found the Vega Junction Supply Depot. 6 enemy ships, heavily armed. Our people there need immediate evacuation. Jack felt his blood turn cold. The Vega Junction was one of the most important supply stops on the Underground Railroad. It was where human ships met to transfer cargo, share information, and plan operations against the aliens. If the Zilani destroyed it, they would cut the resistance network in half. How many people need extraction? Jack asked. 230 civilians, plus 40 resistance fighters, and all the supplies we can carry. Jack looked at his ship's cargo hold, which was already packed with 50 refugees. The Rusty Angel could not possibly carry almost 300 more people. But he could not just abandon them to the aliens either. I'll need backup, he said. How many other ships can you get there? 3 ghost ships and maybe a couple of other smugglers. That's all we have in the area. It was not enough. Not even close. But it was what they had. And that would have to be enough. All right, Moondog, give me the coordinates. Iron Jack is coming to the party. The flight to Vega Junction took 4 hours, flying at maximum speed through space that was crawling with alien patrols. Jack had to use every trick he knew to avoid detection, hiding behind asteroids and using the gravity of planets to mask his ship's heat signature. When he arrived at the junction, he could see the battle had already started. 6 Zilani ships, each one bigger than a human destroyer, were attacking the small asteroid base that served as the supply depot. Human fighters were buzzing around them like angry bees, trying to distract the aliens while transport ships evacuated the civilians. Jack could see the ghost ships phasing in and out of normal space, using their alien technology to avoid the Zilani weapons. But there were too many enemies and not enough humans. The base's shields were failing, and some of the evacuation ships had already been destroyed. This is Iron Jack to all ships, he announced on the resistance frequency. I'm going in to help with the evacuation. Jack, stay back, Commander Chun's voice replied. Your ship isn't armed. You can't fight those things. Jack looked at his weapons display, which showed exactly nothing. The Rusty Angel was a cargo hauler, not a warship. She had no missiles, no lasers, no armor to speak of. But she did have something that the military ships did not have. She had a cargo hold full of people who had been pushed around by aliens. For too long. You're right, Moondog, Jack said. I can't fight them. But I can ram the biggest one and give you time to finish the evacuation. Jack, no, that's suicide. Maybe, Jack said, turning his ship toward the largest Zilani vessel. But sometimes that's what it takes. He pushed the engines to full power and aimed the Rusty Angel at the alien ship like a missile, made of steel and human stubbornness. Behind him, he could hear Maria and the other refugees singing an old Earth song about going home. It was not a bad way to go out, but just before he reached the alien ship, 3 more human vessels appeared out of nowhere. Fast attack ships with experimental weapons, pilots who had volunteered for missions that nobody expected them to survive. The cavalry had arrived. The battle turned in seconds. And new ships hit the Zelani vessels with everything they had, while the ghost ships used the distraction to evacuate the last of the civilians from the base. Jack pulled his ship out of the ramming run at the last second, his hands shaking from adrenaline and relief. "This is Commander Chun to all ships." Sarah's voice came over the radio. "Evacuation complete. All ships, bug out. We'll regroup at Rally Point 7. As the human fleet scattered into the darkness, Jack looked back at the burning alien ships and smiled. The Zelani thought they could crush humanity by cutting them off from each other, but they had underestimated something important. Admiral Maria Reyes stood in the command center of the hidden base, looking at the largest collection of human warships that had been assembled since the blockade began. 2 years of smuggling, fighting, and dying had led to this moment. Operation Prometheus was about to begin, and every human in the galaxy was counting on them to succeed. The plan was insane. Even Reyes had to admit that. They were going to attack the gravity well generators that held the blockade together, using captured alien ships as Trojan horses, while ghost ships attacked from inside the barrier. If it worked, they would shatter the invisible prison that had trapped humanity for over 2 years. If it failed, the human resistance would be destroyed completely. "Admiral," Captain Chun said, approaching from the communication station, "all ships are reporting ready. The captured alien vessels are loaded with our people and ready to move." Rees nodded. Getting those alien ships had cost them dearly. 3 major battles, dozens of good people dead, and months of dangerous salvage operations in space that crawled with enemy patrols. But it had been worth it. The Zelani would never expect their own ships to be carrying human attack teams. "What about the ghost ships?" Reyes asked. "Dr. Webb has finished installing the new phase generators. We now have 47 ships that can phase through the gravity walls. That's more than we ever dreamed of having. 47 ships. Against a blockade that was protected by over 300 alien vessels and weapons that could destroy planets. The odds were not good, but they were better than doing nothing and slowly starving to death. And the distraction fleet? Captain Morrison and the smugglers are in position. They're going to hit the patrol stations in Sector 12 at the same time we attack the generators. The aliens will have to split their forces." Reyes smiled. Iron Jack had volunteered for what was basically a suicide mission, taking his smugglers and raiders to attack heavily defended alien bases just to draw enemy ships away from the main target. It was the kind of crazy brave thing that humans did. When they were backed into a corner, "All right," Reyes said. "Send the signal. Operation Prometheus is a go." The attack began at exactly 1400 hours, coordinated across the entire solar system. The first wave was the captured alien ships, 23 vessels that looked exactly like Zelani, warships, because that was what they had been before human boarding parties took them over. Commander Chun was aboard the lead ship, a massive Zelani cruiser that they had renamed the Trojan Horse. The alien crew was locked in the cargo holds, and human engineers had spent weeks learning how to operate the strange alien controls. It was like trying to fly a ship designed for creatures with 4 arms and eyes that could see colors humans did not even have names for. "This is Trojan Horse to all captured vessels," Chon said into the alien communication system. "Stay in formation and act natural. We need to get as close to the generators as possible before they realize what we are." The alien ships flew through, space in perfect formation, just like a normal Zelani patrol. To any observer, they looked like reinforcements coming to strengthen the blockade. Nobody would suspect that they were actually carrying the largest human strike force ever assembled. But getting close was only part of the plan. The real attack would come from inside the blockade itself. Captain Torres was aboard the ghost ship Phantom, one of 47 vessels that had phased through the gravity walls and were now hiding in the space between the barriers and the alien generator stations. His ship was invisible to alien sensors because it existed in a slightly different reality, neither fully solid nor completely ghostly. All ghost ships, this is Phantom Leader, Torres said on the phase-shifted communication frequency that Dr. Webb had developed. Target the power cores. We hit them all at the same time, and we hit them hard. The gravity well generators were massive stations, each one the size of a small moon. They floated in space like metal planets, covered in weapons and shields that could stop any normal attack. But they had one weakness that the aliens had never considered. They were not designed to be attacked from inside their own defensive perimeter. Phantom Leader, this is Ghost Rider, came a voice from another ship. I've got a visual on Generator Station Alpha. There are about 50 alien ships defending it, but they're all facing outward. They're not expecting us. Torres smiled. Aliens had spent 2 years building the perfect prison for humanity, but they had forgotten that humans were very good at escaping from places where they were not supposed to be. Meanwhile, in Sector 12, Iron Jack Morrison was leading his smugglers and raiders in the most dangerous mission of his life. They were attacking 3 heavily defended alien patrol bases at the same time, using modified cargo ships and salvaged weapons against some of the most powerful warships in the galaxy. This is Iron Jack to all raiders, he said over the radio, as laser fire lit up the space around his ship. Remember, we don't have to win this fight. We just have to keep them busy long enough for the main attack to work. The Rusty Angel was taking a beating. Alien weapons had torn holes in her hull and knocked out half her systems, but she was still flying. Jack had reinforced her with armor plating salvaged from destroyed human warships, and she could take punishment that would destroy most ships her size. Jack, Maria Santos shouted from the gunner's position. Alien cruiser coming in from starboard. Big one. Jack pulled his ship into a tight turn that made his teeth rattle. The alien cruiser was 3 times the size of his ship and had enough firepower to turn him into space dust, but it was also slow and clumsy. Human ships might not be as advanced, but they were built by people who understood that sometimes you had to be fast and sneaky instead of big and strong. All ships break formation, Jack ordered. Make them chase us through the asteroid field. Let's see how well those big ships handle some close quarters flying. Back at the blockade, the main attack was beginning. The captured alien ships had gotten within weapons range of the generator stations before the Zelani realized what was happening. When the human crews finally dropped their disguises and opened fire, the aliens were caught completely off guard. This is Trojan Horse, Commander Chan announced as her ship's weapons tore into the nearest generator station. All human ships. Attack for Earth, for the colonies, for everyone we've lost. The battle that followed was unlike anything that had ever happened in human space. Dozens of ships on both sides traded fire at point-blank range while ghost ships phased in and out of reality to attack the generator cores. The space around the blockade lit up with explosions and laser fire, so bright it could be seen from Earth. Chan watched as one of the massive generator stations began to collapse under the combined attack from her fleet and the ghost ships. The alien shields failed first, followed by the outer hull, and then the power core itself began to overload. Generator Station Alpha is going critical. Dr. Webb's voice came over the radio from his monitoring position on Earth. Massive energy. Build-up detected. All ships get clear. The explosion when the station died was like watching a star being born in reverse. A flash of light brighter than the sun, followed by a shockwave that tossed ships around like toys. But when the light faded, there was a gap in the blockade. For the first time in over 2 years, there was open space between Earth and the stars. Beyond, we did it, someone shouted over the radio. The barrier is down, but the celebration was premature. The aliens were not going to let their prison be destroyed without a fight. Reinforcements were already arriving from across the galaxy, and the remaining generator stations were powering up their weapons to maximum. All ships, this is Admiral Reyes, came the voice from the command base. The first barrier is down, but we're not finished yet. Ghost ships, continue your attacks on the remaining generators. Captured ships, hold your positions and keep fighting. And somebody get me a damage report on our losses. The losses were heavy. Half of the captured alien ships had been destroyed, and almost a third of the ghost ships were either damaged or missing. But they had proven something important. The alien blockade could be broken. It was not an invincible wall after all. Just a very big and very dangerous one. Captain Torres brought the Phantom out of phase shift long enough to fire a full spread of missiles at Generator Station Beta. The weapons struck the alien power core just as his ship became ghostly again, avoiding the return fire by existing in a different reality. Direct hit on the core, he reported. Station Beta is losing power. I think we can take it down. Across the battle zone, human ships continued their desperate attacks, while Iron Jack and his raiders kept the alien reinforcements busy. It was a race against time, with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. And then, with a flash of light that could be seen across the solar system, Generator Station Beta exploded. Another gap opened in the blockade, and another as Station Gamma fell to the ghost ship attacks. The invisible walls that had trapped humanity for so long were crumbling, one piece at a time. This is Earth control to all ships, Admiral Hayes announced from the planet below. The blockade is collapsing. Repeat, the blockade is collapsing. All available ships, prepare to break out. It's time to go home to the stars. 6 months after the blockade fell, Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the surrender ceremony taking place on the Zolani homeworld below. The massive alien cities that had once been untouchable were now defended by human ships. The species that had thought they could cage humanity forever was now begging for mercy. It had not been an easy victory. Breaking the blockade was only the beginning of the war. Once humanity was free to move again, they had discovered just how badly their colonies had suffered during the 2 years of isolation. Millions of people had died from starvation, disease, and alien attacks on the outer worlds. Entire settlements had been wiped out by Zolani forces that thought no help would ever come, but help had come. And it had come with a fury that shook the galaxy. The first human fleet to break through the collapsed blockade had been led by Commander Chon herself, racing to reach Proxima Colony where her sister and children had been trapped. What she found there had changed everything. The colony was barely alive. The fusion reactor had failed months earlier, leaving the settlement running on emergency power. The farms had been destroyed by Zolani bombardment. Nearly half the population was dead, including many children who had starved when the food ran out. Chon had found her sister in the medical center, dying from a disease that could have been easily cured with medicine from Earth. Her 2 young nephews were already dead, buried in a graveyard that was too full of small graves. Why? Her sister had whispered before she died. Why did they do this to us? We never hurt anyone. That question had burned in Shun's mind as she returned to Earth to report what she had found. And when the other rescue fleets came back with similar stories from across human space, That burning question had turned into something much more dangerous. It had turned into rage. "Admiral," Lieutenant Rodriguez said, interrupting her thoughts, "the Zalani High Council is ready to begin the surrender ceremony." Chon nodded and activated the communication system that would broadcast her words to every human ship in the fleet and every human colony across the galaxy. Hundreds of thousands of people were watching, people who had lost family and friends to the alien blockade. "This is Admiral Chun to all human forces," she said. "Today marks the end of the Zalani War. But before we accept their surrender, I want everyone to remember why we fought." On the screen, the alien leaders were assembling in their great council chamber. 12 different species, all of them bowing their heads in defeat. The same aliens who had declared humanity too dangerous to be allowed freedom now looked small and frightened. "They locked us in a cage because they were afraid of us," Chun continued. "They cut us off from our children and left our colonies to die alone. They called us aggressive, but we were the ones trying to build new homes among the stars. They were the ones who brought war to our doorstep. The past 6 months had been a nightmare for the Zalani hegemony." Once humanity broke free of the solar system, they had not just returned to their scattered colonies. They had united them into the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. Every human settlement, from the smallest mining station to the greatest cities, had contributed ships and volunteers to the war effort. Farmers became soldiers. Engineers became ship captains. Scientists became weapons designers. The species that the aliens thought they understood had revealed a capacity for organized violence that terrified everyone who saw it. The human war machine had moved through space like a force of nature. They had liberated every human colony. Within 3 months, destroying Zalani bases and capturing alien technology along the way. But liberation was not enough for people who had watched their children die, while help was kept away by an artificial barrier. The humans wanted justice. And justice, they had decided, meant the complete destruction of the Zalani military and the occupation of their homeworlds. Iron Jack Morrison had been one of the first to reach the Vec homeworld, leading a fleet of modified cargo ships against the spider-like aliens who had helped design the gravity well generators. The battle had lasted 3 days, and when it was over, the Vec had surrendered unconditionally rather than see their cities turn to glass. Dr. Marcus Webb had led the attack on the Vorthok warrior worlds, using improved ghost ship technology to appear inside their planetary defense networks and destroy their fleets from within. The proud warrior race that had conquered dozens of worlds had found themselves helpless against enemies who could walk through walls and strike without warning. One by one, the species of the Zalani hegemony had fallen. Some had fought bravely and died with honor. Others had surrendered quickly when they realized that human mercy was in short supply. All of them had learned the same lesson that Earth had tried to teach them 2 years earlier. Humans did not stay in cages. "The war is over," Chun announced as the alien leaders knelt in their council chamber. "The Zalani hegemony is dissolved. Their military forces are destroyed. Their weapons are confiscated. And their homeworlds are now under human protection." Protection. That was the word the diplomats had chosen, though everyone knew what it really meant. The alien worlds were conquered territory now, occupied by human forces that would make sure no one ever tried to build another blockade. The Zalani High Counselor, a tall alien with gray skin and 4 arms, stepped forward to speak. His translator device made his words sound flat and emotionless, but Chun could see the fear in his alien eyes. We accept the terms of surrender," he said. "We acknowledge that our actions were wrong. We ask only that you show mercy to our civilians, as we should have shown mercy to yours." Mercy. Chun almost laughed at the word. Where had Mercy been when her nephews were starving? Where had Mercy been when the Conway expedition was crushed, trying to bring food to dying colonies? But she was a professional soldier, and professional soldiers did not let personal grief override their duty. "The terms are simple," she said. "All Zilani military forces will be disbanded. All weapons of mass destruction will be turned over to human authorities. No member species of the former hegemony will be allowed to maintain a space fleet larger than what is needed for system defense. And most importantly, no alien government will ever again interfere with human expansion or threaten human colonies." Alien counselor nodded quickly. "We accept these terms. We will comply with all human demands." "Good," Chun said. "Because if any species ever tries to cage humanity again, we will not stop with occupation. We will not stop with surrender. We will keep fighting until that species no longer exists." It was a harsh threat, but it was also a necessary one. The galaxy needed to understand that humanity had changed during the blockade. They were no longer the peaceful explorers who had left Earth 200 years ago. They were harder now, colder, shaped by loss and betrayal into something that could be truly dangerous when threatened. The surrender ceremony ended with the lowering of the Zilani battle flag and the raising of the human banner over every former hegemony world. Across the galaxy, human ships took up positions around alien planets, making sure that everyone could see the new reality. Humanity was no longer asking for permission to explore the stars. They were taking their place as the dominant power in the galaxy, and they would hold that place with fleets that could appear anywhere and strike without warning. Chun walked to the observation deck and looked out at the alien world below. Cities that had never seen human ships were now protected by them. Aliens who had thought humans were primitive were now ruled by them. The galaxy had a new order, and that order was written in human starlight. "Admiral," Rodriguez said, joining her at the window. "Message from Earth Command. They want to know our next move." Chun smiled. Earth Command was thinking too small. The next move was not about Earth, or even about the former Zilani territories. The next move was about making sure that every intelligent species in the galaxy understood the new rules. "Send a message to all human fleets," she said. "Begin long range patrol operations. I want our ships seen in every system, around every alien world. Let them know that we are watching. And if they ask what we're watching for..." Chun looked up at the stars, thinking about all the human colonies that were now building new cities and new lives under the protection of human warships. Thinking about the children who would grow up free to explore any world they chose, protected by fleets that could cross the galaxy in months instead of years. "Tell them we're watching for anyone who thinks they can put humanity back in a cage," she said, "and remind them what happened to the last ones who tried. The stars had belonged to many species before humanity arrived. They had been ruled by ancient empires and mighty federations, by warrior races and peaceful traders. But now they belonged to the children of Earth, the species that had learned to turn desperation into determination and grief into unstoppable force. The blockade was broken. The war was won. And humanity would never be caged again.